This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Well, right now, what it do? Now we nearing the Christmas season here in Guyana, which means that work and school currently kicking me ass. And that's the reason why me been putting out no long-term videos, no long-form videos. But since the year is 2025 currently, I thought it would be a nice little feature where I could just make a video, putting out something that is relevant to my country. Give you a little history lesson on my country and sharpen the minds of a lot of kids in my country as well. Because a fascinating thing I discovered the other day is that I got a lot of people them in the 20s who don't know about this, and I make I feel real old because I was there when this happened. What am I talking about? Well, this year marks 20 years since the Great Flood of 2005. Well, actually, we are actually closer to the 21st anniversary, seeing that this happened in January of 2005. And really and truly, we're closer to the 22nd anniversary because the storms that happened that led to the flood started in 2004. But I getting ahead of myself. What is, or where exactly is Guyana? Let me just give you a briefing. So Guyana, formerly British Guyana, or the Unified Counties or Colonies of Demerara, Essequibo, and Berbice, is a weird country to say the least. Guyana is a country found in South America whose main language or official language is English. However, the citizens in Guyana learn English as a secondary language because Guyanese Creole or Creolese is what we actually speak. If you listen to how I talk something, you could really tell that English is not, or standard English is not what I grew up speaking, right? But also, the weirdest part about it, outside of it being the only English-speaking country on a Spanish-speaking continent for the most part, is that Guyana is mostly associated with the Caribbean. Mind you, Guyana is nowhere near the Caribbean in terms of geography. However, we share a common history being from British colonies and so forth. So that's the reason why the Caribbean community's headquarters is found here. But really and truly, we ain't really gonna get into that. I ain't getting into that another day. What I'm really here to discuss is the fact that Guyana is called the land of many waters for a reason, right? About 30% of this country is either surrounded by a body of water or was once covered almost entirely by a body of water. Because this is my hometown, Georgetown, the capital city in the modern era. But this is what it looked like back then, before any sort of infrastructure was established. You get the point? So we can see why floods and so forth affect Georgetown and the coastline specifically. But really and truly, we need to set the stage of what 2005 or 2004 rather looked like in Guyana. In 2024, Guyana was categorized as being the fastest growing economy in the world. But 20 years before that, that was the furthest thing from the truth. Let me tell you, at this point, Guyana was about 37 to 38 years away from independence. And let's just say that post-independence didn't treat Guyana fairly, or at least the people who were in power didn't treat Guyanese people fairly, because this country was looking like dregs. I mean, let me just tell you something, right? Television was invented in the 1930s, I believe. 1930s, 1940s, it became widely available around the world around the time of the 1960s. But Guyanese people didn't get television sets until the 1970s, a proper television station until the 1980s, and really and truly TV didn't become a proper commodity until the 2000s. Yeah, that was the state in Guyana. It wasn't like everybody was poor and suffering, but the country as a whole was suffering. And one of the worst parts about the country at the time was the infrastructure. Terrible roads, no proper building structures and so forth. And may I remind you, Georgetown and the rest of the lower coastal plain is below sea level. At this point, it was about 4 or 5 feet. Now in this modern age, it's 7 feet. And we didn't have proper coastal defense against the constant high tides. And that leads me to 2004 December storms. So heavy rain started from December 2004, which is business as usual down here because we usually get rain around this time, like heavy rainfall into Christmas. But this was different, right? A strange amount of rainfall came down in 2004's December Christmas season, and a lot of areas that usually flood were flooding, right? But it was like it just happened in three waves. Like the first was in Christmas time, December, and then it just kept falling and falling into New Year's. And it was just, flooding happened around going into the New Year. Like we had a little flood here, it eased off, then a little flood here, then it eased off. And then it was January 14th into January 15th to be specific, when the Demerara Conservancy, I think this is the word, I can't really remember here. Well, that is like the sea defense for the coastline of Demerara, which is where Georgetown, the capital city, is located. That broke, right? That broke early in the morning in January 15, 2005. And people woke up the next day to their houses filled with dirty water, bro. Like, this water was brown. So it was some of the nastiest water I ever experienced in my life. And at the point, I was like 3-4 years old. I remember, like I said earlier, right? Georgetown on the coastline is below sea level. Well, we got this thing called the seawall that's lined up all across the coastline up until Berbice, and really and truly protects the coast from the Atlantic Ocean. However, high tide is still a serious problem that we face here in Georgetown on the coastline. And when that levee broke that morning, the high tide just came in from the ocean along with the rainstorms coming down, and it just flooded and washed all the way. And mind you, right, let me just paint the scene of how Georgetown is situated. So main parts of Georgetown, coming back to like the central and southern parts of Georgetown, very low, right? And then North Georgetown or Greater Georgetown is like a hill, and it was set up in order to accommodate the seawall, right? So when that conservancy broke, ocean water was flooding into Georgetown and the mainland, and not only that, but also the drainage system also broke. So it wasn't just the ocean water, the salt water rushing into town, but we also had the dirty drainage water mixing with it, plus the terrestrial rainfall coming down. So for like 4 straight days, because rain started easing around January 19th, 4 straight days, it was just a barrage of water just washing through the coastline. It was the town. It was just, I got images on the screen right now, but town was just a reservoir, bro. It was like almost like a river. It was almost like a river just consuming. Like there's overhead images of town just submerged in water, bro. It was not a good thing. One of the lasting legacies of this was that a serious outbreak of leptospirosis broke out in Guyana. And I don't think a lot of people across the world know what leptospirosis is, but down here in the tropics, we just get a lot of swampy and marshy areas. But this year here was when it gained a level of infamy down here, because around 3 or 4 people died during this flood, and most of them died because of the illnesses associated with leptospirosis. It like for years we were scared of this illness, this disease, bro. It was just breaking out all over the place. And again, like I was saying, people were swimming in sewage and ocean water. That's not a good sign. The president would declare a state of emergency, and by February 2005, the waters would start to subside and things start to get back in order. Mind you, in this time, Guyana was in the midst of like the craziest era of like this century right here, because we were 2 years removed from a prison break that led to about 4 years of like tremendous crime. So that was still on the rise. You had people they're making a lot of money, people didn't have proper health care. So when this came, this was just like the pinnacle of bad luck for Guyana. And really and truly, it still resonates with us to this day, because it reminds us of a time when, we had no hope for this country. Like after this flood, I know a set of people just start migrating away from Guyana. One of the best parts of this calamity, sad to say, is that it taught us a lot, because now as of 2025, the cocas, the seawalls, the drainage system as a whole in the country has been overhauled. Yeah, the cocas and seawalls are the same cocas and seawalls built hundreds of years before, but hey, we haven't had anything like this since, I think the last major flood we had in this place was like 2015 probably. It wasn't even anything too big, but like I was saying, we don't experience things like this now, because we actually completely overhauled the legislation when it comes to sustainable development goals in order to protect the people and salvage our nation, essentially, when it comes to environmental hazards and so forth. And that's one of the best parts about it. As my country prepares to celebrate 60 years of independence next May, right? it's really critical that we look back at incidents like this and reflect at how we actually handling things better nowadays. Because let me tell you, Guyana is far from perfect. Really and truly is far from perfect. But if I'm to compare Guyana in 2005 to 2025, we in a far better state than we were then. And that's all I could ask for sometimes, really and truly. Anyways, y'all look out for my shorts then whenever I drop them, and I'm gonna be seeing y'all soon. Later though.
Oh no, I ain't going nowhere. I love this place. Do you